Hello, my name is Ben Helfon, and I am the co-author of Our Happy Divorce, How Ending Our Marriage Brought Us Closer Together. Welcome once again to our live stream. Tonight it's Heartbreak to Happiness, and I am joined, as always, by one Miss Kate Anthony and Susan Guthrie. And not only am I joined on the live stream by Susan Guthrie, but we actually met in person.
I mean, this is amazing. I'm so jealous.
Well,
I mean, by the way, Susan and I hung out in person like it's like a few years ago. So
you're going to try to one-up me here. Is that what it is?
Yep.
But it was actually surreal. I mean, when you get to, Susan, obviously, we've been doing this live stream for about a year. We've talked, we've been on our podcast, we've talked, not off the live stream, and to meet somebody that you've developed with such a friendship with in person, it was almost surreal. There was a little surrealness to it. It was like, there's more to Susan than just the face and the whole. And
she exists from more than the shoulders up.
She has legs. She has legs.
Legs, yes, and she stands and walks. But no, we got to go to a basketball game here in Tampa, and it was fun. It was good to finally meet you, Susan.
It was really fun. It was good to meet you and your entire beautiful family. How much fun were they? We, of course, David, my husband, and I brought all kinds of sugar and candy for the kids, and they were there for very peppy. It was lots of fun.
Yes.
I don't know if Ben and Nadia appreciated it by the end of the evening.
We did, because it kept them going, and we got to, witness the benevolent aunt that Susan always talks about as the stepmom to 3 triplets that she acts.
Same thing. It give the benevolent aunt situation like on parade.
Walking with candy and Easter bunnies that are like this big.
Now, she didn't get to meet Nikki, so there's still a question of whether Nikki really exists, and Our Happy Divorce is just one big, giant marketing scam. But we are trying to plan a dinner while Susan's still here. But I'm really happy to have our guest tonight. I think it's our first international guest. But Sara Davison, best known as a divorce coach, has created revolutionary new ways to cope with breakups and divorce. She's combined her coaching skills with her own personal divorce experience to create a unique program to help anyone battling a breakup. Sara's a best-selling author of Uncoupling, How to Survive and Thrive After Breakup and Divorce. She's also a media commentator around the world on this topic, and she's also the host of the Heartbreak to Happiness, hence the title of our stream tonight. Podcast. So without further ado, as they say, Sara Davison. How are you?
I'm so chuffed. I'm your first international guest. Wow, thank you, Ben.
I believe, and all the way from the UK. And we're glad to have you and your years of experience, what I found so interesting is you were in the executive coaching world, and then you had a personal experience around divorce and switch, and if you could talk about how you got into divorce coaching and what you're doing today.
Yeah, I mean, I've been coaching really since I was straight out of university. It was always something that I'd enjoyed doing. I'd heard about it. But I sort of fell into it having been to a Tony Robbins seminar, who's one of on your side of the pond. And he came over to Europe, and I was lucky enough to go along and see him. And that really, it sounds kind of crazy, but it changed my life, that one event, because he was talking about being able to be whoever you want to be and do whatever you want to do. And that wasn't something that I'd really understood as a concept before. I went to a school. I wasn't particularly bright or particularly popular or particularly good at anything, to be honest. So I sort of thought I'd sort of tick along and be mediocre, because that's kind of what I was told at school. And Tony was talking about what are you passionate about and what do you enjoy, and helping people and making a difference was something that I'd always enjoyed. So and that sort of took the blinkers off a little bit, and I started working with some really incredible motivational speakers. And I actually set up a business when I was 21 years old. So a long time ago now, but I was flying them from America, from where you guys are, across to the UK, because over here in the UK, as you probably know, we're always about 10 years behind when it comes to personal development. So it was kind of new over here. And, we were riding the crest of a wave. It was amazing. And I got to work and train with people like Tony and some other great speakers. And so, I started off like that, but I got into the divorce coaching side when I met my husband, and our relationship sort of fell apart and completely shocked me. I mean, it hit me like a freight train. And I'd been coaching, and I had my own coaching practice then, but we also ran a training business. And I was absolutely floored. And I thought, gosh, if I'm struggling to cope, and I've got 15 years coaching experience at this stage, how do people who aren't trained in emotional state management cope with this? How do they get through the day? So basically, I tried to find help. I Googled, and my divorce was quite chaotic. My ex had met someone very quickly. She was pregnant. She was working in our business. We had a global business. Everybody knew about it. So we had offices in Australia and the UK. So, in my world, it was quite humiliating. It was very embarrassing. My son was only one. So I was a single parent, and my ex was madly in love and, wanted me to be happy for him to move on. And obviously I was really struggling with the shock, and I hadn't seen it coming. So I decided the only way to get through was to dig deep. And I basically combined my coaching experience with being thrown into the legal world, which Susan will know all about, which as a layperson was very intimidating, very scary. I didn't understand it. Lots of jargon that was completely alien. So I basically put my own program together to get me through. And then from there, my first book came out, Uncoupling. I ran retreats in the UK called Breakup Recovery Retreats, which the Daily Mail got hold of and blasted it across their papers, calling it Heartbreak Hotel. And it kind of took off from there, really. So that's how I got into the divorce coaching and realized that, what I put together to get me through could actually help a lot of others. So, and because I was so passionate about it at that point, that was something that I thought I'm going to really enjoy, helping other people and turning this traumatic experience into something that has a positive outcome in the end.
Wow. So the, one thing that Kate specializes in, is the decision of should I stay or should I go, and making that decision. And Kate, if you could just sort of tell us how people, sort of know it's over, or how you coach people on making that decision and when that decision should be made.
I don't think that there's one answer to that. I think it's a very personal process, and it is a process. I mean, when I was going through it, right, I was asking everyone. I was like, how do you know? How do you know? How do you know? How do you know when it's done, when you literally have tried? Because you keep thinking well, there's just something else. There's another program. There's another, therapist. There's another type of therapy. There's another, retreat or whatever. And you keep thinking that there's a key and it's hidden and you're looking for it, right? And at the end of the day, I was asking everybody, and my friend David said to me, he's like, Kate, when you know, you'll know. And I was like, but I don't know. And then eventually, actually, one day I did know. And it was a very clear moment when I realized that if I didn't, because I was being told from all angles that I needed to stay in my marriage for my son. And the day that I realized that I needed to leave for my son was my moment. Because I could see I could see the whole path in front of me about who he would end up being, who he would end up choosing, how he would end up, treating women, the whole thing, right? But out of that experience, and then my training as a coach and all of that other stuff, similar to Sara, I created my program, which at the end of the day, what I do when I work with women, sort of boiled down to, if you distill it down, is that I help women get rid of all the fucking noise and really listen to themselves. And there's a lot of noise. There's personal noise. There's inner critics. There's the voice of your ex who's telling you that you're selfish or that you're the problem, and that if you just go to one more, therapist, or then you will stop being the problem. If there's cultural noise that tells women that how they have to be good wives, and there's you'll see it in religious institutions that well, if your marriage is suffering, then you should be a better wife, and then he'll stop cheating. Have more sex with him, then he'll stop cheating. All of this shit, right? So at the end of the day, it's clearing out all of the noise and getting down to our core, our essence, our desires, our own inner knowing and understanding. And that sounds really simple.
No,
and it's the hardest thing, right? It's simple, but it ain't easy.
Right, exactly. And that's not mutually exclusive. I know that you work with women, but it's not mutually exclusive to women of the noise. And some of us with different parts between our legs have just as much noise. But it's important, because we both have to struggle with that decision. Now, once that decision's made, Sara and Susan, I want to bring everybody into this, but Susan's always amazed at the fact that the first thing I did when Nikki and I decided to make that decision was I called a lawyer, and I called a shark lawyer, and that was mistake number one, and luckily I got out of that, and didn't get swallowed whole by him, but or our divorce. But what are some of the mistakes, Sara, that you see people making when they do make that tough decision of divorcing?
Well, that's a really good question, because it really depends on what's going on with you. Like, do you want ultimately to spend the next months or years just fighting and battling it out? Or, it is going to get difficult, even for the most amicable of couples. When you start separating finances and looking at who the kids are going to spend time with, that does put pressure on. And even the nicest, kindest people will feel threatened and will react sometimes badly to those situations. So I think it's important to set some rules beforehand, if you can, and just communicate, look, it's going to be tough, but this is how we're going to approach it when it gets difficult, if you can. But then there's other divorces where you can't communicate. Maybe it's a toxic relationship. Maybe your ex has been abusive. And then it's just very, very difficult to be able to set any parameters or any rules. So I think you've got to go in with your eyes wide open. If you go into the court system, I know the family system here in the UK, is long overdue an overhaul of what works and what doesn't. So that would be great to bring it and drag it up into, this decade would be great, let alone the century. So, I think it's important to know that you're not always going to get what you feel is justice from the family courts. So actually trying to work out, what you want and what you need from this, and not going for the lawyer, like you said, the shark lawyer, that is the pit bulls that are going to destroy your case and increase the animosity. And that leads to a very expensive divorce, right, Susan?
Yeah. Scary.
And Susan, in your years of being around this game, what are some of the mistakes that you see people make?
Well, the one you made is probably the most common. And I want to be clear, I didn't think it was a mistake to go to necessarily run off to an attorney. I do think you should fact gather, information gather, educate yourself. And lawyers, divorce lawyers, that's what we are. We are a font of information on divorce. But don't hire us right away. And I'm saying that as a member of the profession. I've said that before. So I think people really need to get that clear headspace. It's, yes, do your due diligence, everything that Sara just talked about. You have to know your finances. You have to understand what the law is, or generally what it provides. But then, it's really time to work with someone like Sara or Kate and get your shit together before you then go forward with selecting an attorney who may not be the first person of your team. You may be selecting your attorney down the road. You may want to pick, obviously, your coach right off the bat, but then, you may also want a therapist. Kate and I have talked about that on other shows. Therapists and coaches work together beautifully in many cases. You may want your financial advisor. You may want, your mediator on board, and then you may want to pick your attorney. Your approach is probably the number one thing that I see people doing. The flip side is some people stick their head in the ground. I call it ostrich syndrome, and they just can't deal. And unfortunately, you have to deal. If it's a situation like Sara describes, which I see just as often as I see the I want a divorce, as you see the I wasn't expecting this, I don't want a divorce, you can't stop a divorce from happening. It's going to happen. And there's a lot of energy and time wasted or spent, emotional energy, especially by people who don't want the divorce. And unfortunately, that's to their detriment in the entire process, because it will eventually ramp up the emotional content as well.
Right. And Kate, I want to get you in and to get your input on, but I do what you said, Susan, but I think my intentions of calling that divorce attorney wasn't to gather information. It wasn't to know my rights. I was looking for a therapist, I was looking for a coach, and I was looking for an executioner, right? All in one lawyer. So my intentions of calling that divorce attorney, I think is important. It wasn't, like you said, to get information or know my rights or whatever it was. It was to, destroy Nikki. But Kate?
Yeah.
And I failed, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I just made her stronger.
I think that would have been hard. I don't want to be the attorney taking on Nikki.
No.
Oh, no. What was the question? The biggest mistakes I see people make? I mean, I think it's, I probably said it 700 times on this live stream alone. Just rushing into the process, just rushing in too soon. And I think, on the flip side of that, it's the ostrich syndrome. But, you just, once you've made the decision, especially if you're the one agonizing about it and you've been agonizing about it for a couple of years, and women tend to, by the time they've made the decision, they've grieved the relationship. They are over that hump and they're like, all right, I'm done. Once I made it, I'm done, let's go, I'm out. And Susan, do you want to
My mistake.
And so rushing it like that before your partner's kind of caught up to you can really shoot you in the foot, first of all, right? If you're pushing this through and your partner's still reeling from this, they're not going to be collaborative. They're not going to want to get on board. They're not going to be amicable about it because they're just not emotionally ready for it. So give your partner the time to catch up to where you are. And if they are, in denial and all of those things, then you keep moving it along, but at least give them a minute, right? Give them the chance, the opportunity to catch up. And then, take a fucking breath. There is no divorce race here. There's no prize for the quickest divorce. There's no, right. And it often costs a lot more money, as we said. So just slow it down, do your due diligence, get educated. Look, you've got people like Sara and me and Susan and, Bet, people are divorce professionals who have been through this. And this is our world. This is something you know nothing about. When you're getting divorced, if you're getting, especially the first time at the first rodeo, you don't know anything about this. Don't rush. You've got to learn. You've got to do your due diligence and learn about what this process is. And by the way, what it is where you live, right? We've talked about this before. In your state, in your country, shit is different all over the world. So don't talk to, if I were to call Sara and been tell me how divorce works, but I'm in California and Sarah's in the UK, that's not it, right? So, So that's take your time, process the emotions, allow your, soon to be ex to process theirs, and then get educated. Yeah. Learn about divorce.
It's funny you say that we say it every time, it's 700 times, but that's, the more repetitiveness of just, the more you can pound it through people, the better I think will be. Really? Sara, before we went live, we were talking about the conscious uncoupling versus aggressively severing.
Yes.
And can you explain exactly what that is, aggressively severing?
Yes. Well, I was working as a divorce coach when Gwyneth Paltrow came out and, brought our attention to conscious uncoupling, which is fabulous. And if you can do it, then obviously that is the best way to get divorced, to stay amicable and to achieve, I guess, what you guys have got to, Ben, where you live on the same road and you're in and out of each other's houses. You've both moved on, you go on holidays together. That really is a great solution if you can do it. But I guess it left a lot of my clients feeling very bad because there was no way they could achieve that. Because if one partner is hell bent on causing pain no matter what, then even if you want to divorce amicably, it just isn't going to happen. So I termed it aggressively severing, which is sort of the other end of the scale, if you like, where it is, everyone is having a go. You get the really intense legal letters, the threatening, the bullying, the high anxiety. And I think if you are going through that, then it's really important. I think it's a common mistake that I see my clients make before they get into the process is they think about the costs and they ask their lawyers for a cost estimate and what do they think? I mean, number one, cost estimate, well, I don't know about in the US, but here, let's just see where that brings us. It's not binding and I mean, it's a joke, to be honest, over here. So, but, I mean, obviously the lawyers aren't responsible for what happens necessarily in your case and their costs can spiral. But the other cost, which is completely overlooked, is emotional cost to you. Because I don't think anyone could even imagine how draining a high conflict battle is. And if you've got two firms battling out as well, if you've gone for more of the pit bull, which if someone's aggressively severing, they will have done. If you're up against someone like that, then it is incredibly scary, frightening, bullying, intimidating, confusing, and it's all designed to be that way. But I think, you've got to really think about the process emotionally and the impact that's going to have on you. If you have to go to work or you have to show up as a parent, these are things you're going to need a support team in place if you've got to go through it. And you've got to understand what you're getting into so someone can take some of that emotion out for you, like Kate or myself, to sort of explain what that's going to look like, what that journey looks like. So you're not in it just thinking, oh my goodness, where on earth am I right now? This is an alien world where anything goes, it seems. It's like being in the boxing ring with Mike Tyson. They just hit you out of all corners. So, I think that's what aggressively severing is. You can get through it, you will get through it, but there are definitely techniques that will help you manage that better and take control so that you don't come out the other side, damaged from it, because it is a very intense process.
Well, to use the Mike Tyson analogy too, I think he said that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. I guess you could use that in the divorce, right? Because you're going to get punched in the face. I mean, even with Nikki and I, we could have the best intentions, but when you're dealing with the romance, the finance, and every other nonsense that comes across in divorce, it's a punch in the face, and that it can go sideways. There was something you brought, the idea. Look, Nikki and I do live in a world, as Susan calls it, of unicorns and rainbow waterfalls, and but is it possible? Is it possible if the two people aren't amicable to go from heartbreak to happiness? And how does that look? If one party isn't on board and is just going to be that disruptive, how does the other person deal and get to that happiness part?
Great question, because it's essential, and it's you've got to take back your control where you can. We can't control what they're doing. You can't control what they're going to say or do, what the next letter's going to say, how they're going to come at you. You just can't control that. What they're going to do with the kids, you can't control it. But you can control how you process that. You can take control of how you are reacting to it. You can take control of how you set up your support system around you so that you are best prepared and have people around you that that you can get the answers from, whether it's legal professionals or a coach or a therapist, but also your family and friends support. And you've got to choose them carefully, because some friends will be so emotionally involved that they will do what one of my clients turned up for a first session, which he popped we call it boots or trunk, I think you call it, of the car, and inside were these sort of bags full of his coats and shoes and suits, all like destroyed, like absolutely destroyed. And her best friend had come over and said, "Come on, this is going to be good. We'll show him." You know, some friends are so emotionally involved. You've got to be careful with those friends. They're well-meaning, but they can cause issues if you take their advice. So your team that you have around you have to carefully select and make sure that, you know, they are people that are going to give you constructive advice. You still have your other friends, obviously, but, you know, not the ones that you're going to listen to and action on their advice. But yeah, I mean, I think it's all about taking back your own control. It's all about, you know, doing what you can to you know, get through the process best you can and protecting yourself. I'm sure Kate's got things to add to that, but I mean, absolutely, you know, focusing it back on you.
Yeah, yep. Kate, you want to add to that? Because I know that's in your wheelhouse.
I totally agree. I mean, I think, you know, surrounding yourself, you know, it's a lot, right? To think of like, oh, I have to have an attorney, or, you know, or a mediator and a therapist and a coach and a, you know, and at the end of the day, I think that the more money you spend on that, the less you're going to spend in, you know, litigation down the road, for sure. And for those same reasons, I mean, I think, you know, what Sara says is absolutely true. You've got friends who want to rip him apart, but that may not be the best thing for you in your divorce, right? And so, and also, what? What's that?
It might feel good though. It might feel
temporarily.
In the moment.
Yeah, in the moment.
And if you have to have a relationship with this person because you share a child, then like it's probably not going to feel good for very long. And you know, you want to, and you also don't want to wear your friends out. You know, I get a lot of calls from women who are like, I just can't talk to my friends about this anymore. Like I feel guilty, like my friends, and they're not professionals. Right? Like we're professionals. This is what we do for all day, every day. So, you know, I just think that's very sage advice, and I completely agree.
Susan, from Sara mentioned something about the estimate, you know, like a quote on getting your car fixed from a lawyer. How does that work, and what are the pitfalls of trying to get an estimate from a lawyer? Or, you know, how much is this going to cost?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is there is absolutely no way for an attorney to know how much your case is going to cost. I mean, or a mediator, it's when I'm meeting with a couple, they always want to know how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. And it's really, the one thing I think people need to understand is in a litigation format, much of what it's going to cost will be out of their control.
Yep. In
a mediative setting, they have much more control over those two things, how long and how much money. There are certainly those instances that Sara very correctly points out. If you have a spouse who's going to make this as difficult as possible, unfortunately, both of your checkbooks better be out, because it doesn't matter what format you're following or what method you're using to work through the divorce. It's going to be more expensive than an amicable divorce, or one where you're cooperative and respectful and you don't have control over that other person. But there truly is no way. What happens, unfortunately, is attorneys will set a retainer amount when clients first come in and they pay an initial retainer. And many clients will equate the retainer with the full fee. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the full fee. It is a number. Here, let me give you a little, pull the curtain back on attorney thinking for a moment for you all. It is a number that we think is large enough to secure enough of our time, so we know we're going to get paid into the future, but that won't scare the client off, so that they leave our office and go hire someone else who's less expensive. It's a balance of that. And it really has nothing to do with what we think, and it's not that, it's just we don't know. We have no crystal ball. Okay, all right. Well, and so, are we back on?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, one of the things is that incident, the first moment Sara said that the trunk of the car, the boot of the car was filled with the clothes and everything all jumbled up. I've seen that. I've had that case. I've had dog poop in shoes. I've had clothes set on fire. I've had motorcycles sold for $1 at tag sales. I've had it all. It may feel good in the moment, but then you're going to be in front of a judge explaining your bad behavior to that judge with me standing beside you at hundreds of dollars an hour. So that little minute of fun is going to cost you. And it's one of those things when you sit across from my conference room table and look completely sane to me and like you're under control, I understand that, I've been through it myself. I did some nutty stuff myself during divorce. I always say, divorce will bring out the crazy and the sanest of people. And we don't know. We just don't know. So you can ask your attorney. It is an illusory number if they do give you one. And I think most attorneys won't give you a firm number. They won't give you a cap.
No, and it's almost like the car payment, right? You make the down payment, but then you have to figure in the monthly payments and
right.
all the other stuff.
Well, let's look at it this way. You hired the shark attorney. He did a little scotch of work for you, and then you fired the shark attorney. How much of that retainer did you get back?
If you look at it as 100%, I got about 3% of the retainer back, and the retainer was not a small number. And he wrote.
And were you divorced at that point?
No, I wasn't even. I don't think Nikki had even hired a lawyer yet. But it was, luckily, again, one of those things, Susan, that you said, like I got into it, and I could see now looking back on it how easily it was to get trapped into the cycle, the vicious, of, him telling me what I wanted to hear and all that. But when I got that retainer back, I was like, wow, 300 and some odd dollars back of a pretty big retainer for a week's worth of work. I kind of got a peek into what could eventually happen. Sara, on your blog, on your website, which I believe is saradavison.com, is that correct?
Yeah.
You talk about, there's a blog on there that I read today that I just found so interesting about what defines a good divorce. And I know there's different, definitions. We obviously, just from a non-professional standpoint of our happy divorce, doesn't mean this crazy, world that we live 7 houses apart and all the other nonsense that goes on in our life. But our happy divorce is basically, in our minds, that you don't stick your kids, with the emotional bill, for your decisions. And so what, in your professional opinion, defines a good divorce?
I think if you can get through the tough times and then have a relationship, an amicable relationship at the end, then you've done a good job. I think understanding that it might get fraught, it might get difficult, you might fall out, but not bad enough so that you can never pick up the pieces and rebuild it. So if you've got through it and you are still able to communicate with your ex, especially if you've got kids, I think that's really important. If you don't have kids, then so long, goodbye, shut that door and move on. But if you have kids, and being able to co-parent and if you can go to school functions and sit next to each other, for example. And I have a technique in my books that I call functionally friendly. And it's basically a technique that I developed for myself so that I could sit next to my ex and his girlfriend of the moment and whoever else was there. He had some other kids at that point as well. So I would sit with them. And I remember, other people in my friends at school were like, how on earth are you managing to do that? But functionally friendly is a really useful technique because it's doing what's best for the kids. And it means you can be amicable, you can be friendly, but it's surface level. You're not sharing any personal details. You're not getting into long conversations. You're not telling them what you're up to or how you feel about anything. But you're managing to sit next to each other so your child doesn't have to think, well, who am I going to look to first? Or at the end of this play, who am I going to run over to and say hi to first? Because I don't want to upset mum. I don't want to upset dad. So actually it's a very, once you get used to it, it's actually quite fun to do, and it actually makes you feel that you're doing a good job. And I think if you can, I guess enjoy it even, and see it for what it is, that you're doing it for your kids. And I know most parents will do more for their kids than they'll ever do for themselves. So actually tapping into that and saying, I'm going to step up. So if you can do those things, I think it does lead to a good divorce, no matter what's going on. Even if there's very high conflict still, you can still use that functionally friendly to be able to manage those situations. So I think it's a really helpful tool.
Kate, you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that's great. I think it's right. I always say, like, if you don't have kids, I don't give a fuck. You guys can go through the legal system. You can, wipe each other dry. You can, bleed out. Like, I don't care if you don't have kids, whatever. But if you have kids, it's your job to deal with your shit. Like, have a therapist, have a coach, be angry, process the emotions, and then show up. I love functionally friendly. I love that. That's a great, and that doesn't mean, you also need to know whether you're co-parenting or parallel parenting. And I think so many people get so, there's so much guilt around not being able to consciously uncouple and not being able to, co-parent. At the end of the day, know your boundaries. If it's not safe for you to co-parent, parallel parenting is perfectly appropriate for many people.
Kate, can you explain, I'm sorry, but can you explain the difference between co-parenting and parallel parenting?
Well, it's a boundary thing, really, right? It's like you're going to just be on two separate shows. You're not going to talk about every single thing. It's more like, okay, what happens in my house is the way that I parent, and I have no control or investment or very little involvement in what's happening at the other house, because that just creates conflict and it makes life miserable for me, and often then more miserable for the kids, right? So you're kind of on parallel tracks that don't touch, and it may suck for the kids, or it may, whatever, but it may also mean the difference between your sanity and you spending more time in therapy, or just beating a dead horse. Like, there are some people that are so high conflict. Most people who are super high conflict are not interested in coming to some kind of co-parenting agreement with you. They're interested in being high conflict. They're interested in making your life miserable. And if you're trying to co-parent with one of those, and you're trying to have these reasonable co-parenting conversations with one of those, you're literally walking into their trap every single time you try to do that. So for those people, you have got to close the door and set up a really strong boundary where, nope, and use a co-parenting app, use, all of the tools so that you protect yourself. Because this is not going to get better. The more they affect you, the bigger the rush. They're addicted to that. That's their goal. So, so I think that to understand where you're at and to choose your path and track, and know that if it's an informed decision, if you've worked with me, if you've worked with Sarah, and we're like, this is not a co-parenting dynamic, this is going to be a parallel parenting dynamic. Trust that we know what we're talking about. And there may be some grieving involved, right? You may have to actually grieve the fact that you don't get to do what, so many others get to do, but that's not your fault, right? That's probably not your fault. And probably the parallel parenting is doing a better job. Sorry, guys, male. Doing a better job at teaching your children healthy boundaries, right? So,
Susan, in the legal world of a good divorce, what can people do to sort of prove their chances we talked about it briefly, but what does it look like as a mediator, a good divorce?
A good divorce in a mediative setting is where I think both of the parties come to agreement, because really a divorce is a judgment, or settlement is a series of agreements, that I'm not going to use the word fair, because I'm not a huge fan of fair, because it's, we divorce attorneys call it the F word in divorce. They've come to agreements that they can live with, that they can go forward, that they've thought through, that they've made with full information, and they pick and choose what they can and cannot live with. And they get to the end and are able to move forward into their parallel futures. I mean, I love what Kate talked about with parallel parenting and co-parenting. And I would say that except for rare cases, there's some level of parallel parenting going on in every healthy co-parenting relationship, because boundaries have to exist in a healthy co-parenting relationship. What I see quite a bit, and this won't be a popular comment, but I quite often see, for the most part, mothers, it does tend to be gender-based, mothers who are overly involved in what's going on in dad's household when the children are with them. And I'll be really honest, it's none of their business, and they are making themselves miserable.
Yep.
Because they are trying to control their co-parent, their ex-husband, their ex-spouse, their former partner, and they've made a decision that they know better. And it sets up a dynamic that actually is toxic for everybody. And those are cases where it's not the high conflict ex that's causing a problem. The other spouse may be perfectly reasonable and doing their best, but making mistakes, as many parents do. Has anyone here had their child fall down and hurt themselves when their child has been with them? Anyone? Right?
It always happened on my watch. The
always,
stitches, always on my watch.
So
yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Sarah. Yeah.
I mean, I've got a slightly different point of view, so I know it might be interesting for people watching, but I get that, and there are people that are, that are in that situation. There are mothers, and I see it a lot, but often behind that is just a lot of fear, and they never, I suppose, from my experience of working with clients like that, their biggest fear is the fact that they never ever set out when they had kids to not spend 100% of their time with them, to not put them to bed every night, to not wake them up, and it's mums and dads, right? But if you're feeling like that and you are trying to control, quite often underlying that is just a real sense of loss, and just that you never signed up to that, and it's very, very difficult to adjust to it. So in those cases, there are things that you can do to work with your ex, so that, for example, if this is not abusive relationships or toxic relationships, this is sort of normal. It might be conflict, but if you're both decent people, then what you could do is sort of work with each other and say, look, I'm finding this a little bit hard because I'm not able to see them so much. I'm worried about them. I'm a mum, I can't just turn that off, or I'm a dad, I can't just turn that off. So if the other parent understands that and is willing to meet halfway, maybe there's some things you can put in place where they do get a little bit of FaceTime with the kids, or they get a report back from the dad, maybe, in those situations, which just help the mother adjust slightly, so that once she gets used to it and more comfortable, she can step back. But sometimes it's more of an emotional block rather than just trying to be difficult and controlling. So, I mean, I'm sure that does happen in some cases, but I would say the majority of people that I see in those situations are genuinely just emotionally distraught at not being able to have their kids with them, especially if it wasn't their decision to end the relationship, someone has betrayed them, and then there's a new partner in the house. I mean, all those factors will make that a little bit worse, I think.
Yeah.
Kate, I know you talk about your own personal experience, and you have before, about wanting to control sort of everything at what happened at your son's dad's house, and how you got through that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think it takes I almost think that Susan and Sarah are talking about the exact same thing, just with different levels of emotional intelligence, right? Because I think it takes something for someone to be able to say, oh, I'm operating out of fear right now. I'm actually scared, as opposed to just because it's usually when you're in that much fear, right? Your impulse is to make it about the other person, unless you are highly emotionally intelligent and go, that's my shit, right? And I did have a similar thing when I first got divorced, where, I mean, it's similar but different. My ex was calling me for everything. He was constantly asking me how to do things, and can you help with this, and can you help with that, and da da da. And I had to set really clear boundaries and be like, I'm sure you'll figure it out. I'm sure you'll figure it out. You are a smart person, and I know you can do this, because if I continued to go to the store and buy the birthday presents for the birthday party that fell on his weekend, like, he was never going to figure it out. He was never going to learn. And then why am I getting divorced, right? If I want to have my separation, then I needed to take the separation. And it was really hard, because I don't think he was as good. The other thing about women, right, is that, like, we're this is definitely I'm saying this, and I understand that what I'm saying is gendered and a generalization. But for the most part, we think that we do everything better. Mostly we're right. And it's really hard for us to take our hands off and let it, like, it's the dishes. It's like we can distill this all down to a conversation about dishes, right? And loading the dishwasher. And the number of times I hear, like, he just doesn't do it right. And my response to that is, so what? Is he doing it? If you feel overwhelmed and overburdened by the amount of work that you have to have in the house, you're going to have to take your hands off and let it get done not perfectly, right? And so, did my ex buy the quote right birthday present? Like, I don't know. I didn't find out. I didn't ask. I just let him figure it out. And he stepped up to become a really great and competent dad, but he never would have had the opportunity to do that had I been micromanaging his every move from another house.
I don't know if I can argue even with the fact that you guys might do it better. I know if Nikki were here, and I don't mean to put words in her mouth, but she would, she had a hard time, and she'd make sure that everything was, that he had everything. But amazingly, yes, Asher might have come with a couple stitches once, and I think he might have I had to put him in a cast for a couple of days while he was at my house. But for the most part, he came back with all his fingers, all his toes, and came back healthy. And he came back, I returned him in relatively the same condition, but he was okay. I guess.
Not eating as many vegetables, but, like, whatever.
He might have had waffles that night for dinner, but you know what? He didn't die.
He's fine. He's fine.
We do have a question, and I'm going to put it up here. I don't know if you guys can read that and maybe weigh in.
My son failed 9th grade. His mother refuses to cooperate with a different school.
Hold on. Come back.
Can you read it out loud, Ben?
Yeah. So my son failed the 9th grade. His mother refuses to cooperate with a different school. I choose for him to start in a new country, which is a must. She's also manipulating a 50-50 custody PPN that I was granted the school registry. It's nuts. I'm going to see what my son's less. I'm going to see my son less if I agree. So I guess it's a custody question, and I know it's a little hard to kind of answer that one, but it's an example of something that might come up, and maybe under picking your battles, or Sarah, I don't know if you have any insight on.
Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of this, and I think we've got to get back to what's best for the child. I think in all these cases, you just got to come back and say, what is best for the child? Not what do you want for the child? What do you want? Or does dad want? What's best for the child? Are they settled in a certain place? Is it easier for them? Do they have a longer commute from another place? Where's the child happiest? Because ultimately, like you said, Ben, we don't want them to be left with the emotional bill. So, it's about working out. Now, the challenge comes where one parent doesn't care about that. Where it's a difficult relationship. I call them difficult people. People say, why do you call them difficult? I'm like, well, I don't want to call them all the other big fancy names because they take enough significance for themselves. I'm shrinking it down. DP, I call them, difficult people. So that is small d, small p. So, if you've got a difficult person who's hell-bent on making your life difficult, then they're not going to understand that or work with that. And that's where the challenge can come. And I think that is where you do need, if you can, to get some good legal representation to understand what your options are and how the voice of your child can be heard.
Yeah, and I think that's a great answer. Kate, do you want to add, or Susan? from a custody. I mean, there's the legal rights, I guess, with 50-50, and then there's the practical. In a lot of sense, the practical seems to be under the category of what's best for the kids. But what point, Susan, from a legal standpoint, is the choice? He just added it isn't a battle; it's a choice, right?
Right. Well, it is a choice if the choice can be made.
Right.
It's a battle. It can come to an agreement. I mean, it's in both the practical and the legal sense, it should be that the best interests of the child are the overriding principle. The problem is, and this is not only for divorced or separated parents, it's for many, many parents, is that they don't agree on what's in their child's best interests. And, it's very hard from the fact pattern that's here to give any sort of color or nuance to this, because there's so many different factors that could be here. But it comes down to either mom and dad are able to get on the same page, work together to come up with a plan, because their son clearly is having some sort of issue. Is it an issue with the school? I think the person who wrote in thinks so, because they want him to change schools. Is that actually it? I don't, we wouldn't know. But the problem with all of this is if people can't sit down in some fashion, even if it's, working on a screen like this with the mediator, there's only one other way to break the tiebreaker, and that's a person in a black robe. I mean, there is no other way. So unfortunately, that is just the paradigm that our society and our legal system has set up. It really behooves your child to in some way try to find a way to work with his mother to come to an agreement. And it doesn't mean that it's always going to be the way that you think it is, and it doesn't always mean that it's going to be the way she thinks it is. There's got to be a compromise, usually.
Compromise is good. It's coming up on that hour, and Sarah, I know it's late over in the UK, and I want to thank you very much for coming on. Where can people find out more about you? Especially go read her blogs, and her website is just a plethora of good information.
Ooh, plethora.
Big word.
Good SAT words.
Yeah. If only we were playing Scrabble.
Thank you, Ben. It's been an honor to be here, and lovely to meet Susan and Kate as well. So thanks, guys. You can find out more information about me on my website, saradavison.com. My retreats and my breakup and divorce coach accreditation training are on there as well, and also my Heartbreak to Happiness podcast is on iTunes, like Susan and Kate's as well. So go check them out.
Anything on your social media, where people can find you on social media?
Oh yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I'm streaming live. Actually, I've streamed live the whole thing, so I'm sure lots of people will be watching and checking you out. So yes, Sara Davison Divorce Coach on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and yes, Instagram.
Well, thank you very much again. And Susan and Kate, as always. Susan, who do you have on tomorrow? Is your release? And Kate, Thursday, yours? Did I finally get it right?
My release. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you got, Susan?
Oh, I've got the amazing Rachel Graham. She has a brand new TEDx that's going viral on unlocking the secrets in your lockbox, and how our secrets make us sick. So it's a fantastic one. So you'll love Rachel. So be sure to listen. She's a very smart lady.
Cool. Awesome.
Okay.
Well, this week, running right now, I've got Ginger Gentile, who's the director of Erasing Family, which is a great film about parental alienation and the legal system and all sorts of stuff. And then on Thursday, I've finally got my Ellen Bruno episode going.
Yay, Ellen!
I finished my mini series on abuse, which turned into like a 2-month expose. Now it's like my film weeks.
And that's Susan. We'll give it up. That's this nice little thing we'll put up. That's where you can find everybody, Kate and Susan and Nikki and myself. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. Grateful, great conversation. Sarah, thank you so much for everything you do.
Sarah, it's so nice to meet you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Sarah.
having me. Loving you. And love to have you both on my podcast. So yeah, let's keep in touch.
Yeah, it'd be lovely.
Yep, let's do it.
We'll do it. We'll do a triumvirate.
It's like the podcast incest game.
The best.
I'll do mine if you do yours.
I want to talk. Wait. What was it? The friendly.
Functional.
No.
Functionally friendly.
Functionally friendly. I love that. We're talking about that for sure.
Functional. You know, it's funny because I meant to bring that up, and Nikki and I didn't use as professional terms. Ours was just fake it until we made it. You know, it was just like let's just smile and pretend everything's all right. But thank you, Sarah and Susan and Kate, as always.
Thank
Bye,
you
guys.
guys. I have to pop off to another meeting. Thank
All right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Sarah, I bet you have to go.